I've got Italian blood in me, and I'm getting pretty damn tired of companies wrapping themselves in the Italian flag. Come on. Authentic? Okay. Traditional? Yeah, right. Family recipe? Come on, man. Everybody wants you to believe their sauce is the real deal. But today, we're going to find out who's full of shit. Every one of these jars, you guys, is telling you a story. One claims to be authentic. Wow. One claims to follow an old family recipe. Woo. One wants you to believe you're buying a little piece of Italy. Yeah, right. Here's the problem, people. Stories don't belong under a microscope. Ingredients do. Texture does. Evidence does. So today, we're stripping away the labels, ignoring the marketing, and finding out which one actually deserves a place on my nonni's Italian dinner table. You want to help me? Capiche? Good. Ciao bella. Let's go. People say you're the closest to homemade. Let's see why.
Rao's didn't become famous because of pasta sauce. It became famous and because almost nobody could get a table. For years, eating at Rao's wasn't just dinner, it was status. And then someone had a brilliant idea. If people can't get into Rao's, bring Rao's to the people. Now, this jar carries one of the biggest reputations and one of the highest price tags in the pasta sauce aisle. So the question is, are we paying for incredible sauce or an incredible story? Let's find out. Right away, Rao's looks surprisingly uneven. Instead of one smooth mixture, you can already see larger chunks of tomato and herbs gathering together, while bright yellow droplets of oil are scattered throughout the slide. Those yellow circles aren't defects. They're tiny pockets of oil separating from the water-based tomato sauce. Now, if this were a heavily processed sauce, I'd expect something very different. The field would look much more uniform, almost like one continuous red paste, with very few recognizable pieces left. That's because more aggressive processing tends to break everything down until individual ingredients become much harder to distinguish. But that's not what we're seeing here. At just 40 times magnification, Rao's still has visible structure. You can actually pick out individual components instead of one perfectly blended mass. And that's our first clue that this sauce may have held onto more of its original ingredients during processing. At 100 times magnification, the picture starts getting much more interesting. That large brown mass isn't one solid object. It's actually thousands of tiny fragments of tomato pulp, crushed plant tissue, and microscopic pieces of herbs packed tightly together. The oil droplets are still easy to spot, but now you can see they vary quite a bit in size. Some are tiny, while others have merged into much larger droplets. That tells us this sauce isn't perfectly homogenized, which is exactly what you'd expect from a sauce that's made to keep more of its natural texture. Now we're starting to leave the world we normally see and enter the microscopic structure of the ingredients themselves. Most of what you're looking at here is broken tomato cell material. During cooking, blending, and processing, the individual cells rupture, releasing pigments, sugars, and natural pectin into the sauce. You can still spot a few oil droplets floating between everything. But what really stands out is how much of the original plant structure is still present. Even after all that cooking, Rao's hasn't completely erased where these ingredients came from. At 1,000 times magnification, we're looking almost entirely at the smallest remaining pieces of tomato tissue. Most of the organized cell structure has been broken apart during processing, leaving behind tiny fragments of plant cell walls, pigments, and microscopic debris suspended throughout the sauce. This isn't the kind of view where one dramatic feature jumps out. Instead, it tells a different story. Even at this level, Rao's still contains recognizable plant material, rather than looking like a completely uniform manufactured emulsion. In other words, there's still evidence that this started as real tomatoes, not just a perfectly blended paste.
People say you've fed more families than anyone else. Let's find out why.
Ragu's on the slide. Now here's what I'm curious about. This sauce has fed millions of families for generations, but it's also one of the least expensive sauces on the shelf. So, did they cut corners, or did they simply figure out how to make a good sauce for less money? There's only one way to find out. Let's take a look. All right, first thing that jumps out, these aren't random chunks floating around. Those are pieces of tomato. You can actually see part of the tomato's outer flesh. Still holding together and scattered all around it are these bright orange droplets. That's oil, mixed in with pigments from the tomato. Let's zoom in. Now we're getting a much better look at the tomato itself. Those little brick-like patterns are individual tomato cells. The sauce hasn't completely broken them apart. You can still recognize the original structure of the tomato. That's actually pretty cool. Let's keep going. Now this is where it gets interesting. We're no longer looking at sauce. We're looking at the inside of the tomato. Every one of these little compartments is an individual tomato cell. The walls separating them are still almost perfectly intact. One more step. And there it is. Now the tomato fills the entire screen. These giant round shapes are individual tomato cells packed tightly together, just like they were before this tomato was turned into pasta sauce. Honestly, I wasn't expecting the tomato structure to survive processing this well.
People say you're restaurant quality in a jar. Let's see what that's based on.
All right, next up, Classico. This is one of those sauces that looks premium before you ever open the jar, the glass jar, the label, even the name. Everything about it says authentic. First, 40 times magnification. Right away, this looks nothing like Rao's or ragu. Instead of large chunks of tomato, the sample is made up of lots of tiny fragments spread across the slide. There's also a long plant fiber running right through the middle. Let's get closer. Now we're at 100 times magnification. That long strand is still there. And now you can see it's surrounded by hundreds of tiny plant fragments. There are also little droplets scattered throughout the sample. So whatever Classico is doing, it's definitely producing a much finer mixture than the last two sauces. Let's keep going. Now this is interesting. We're no longer looking at chunks of tomato. Instead, we're looking at these thin, ribbed, almost transparent pieces of plant tissue. They've got these repeating ridges running all the way across them. This is the first sauce where I've seen structures that look like this. One more step. Now we're at 1,000 times magnification. Those repeating ridges are even easier to see. Whatever this plant tissue is, it's unlike anything we've seen in the other sauces. That's definitely an interesting find.
People say you're the sauce they grew up with. Let's see how you earned that.
All right, next up, Prego. For a lot of people, this is what spaghetti tastes like. It's been a weeknight dinner for generations. 40 times magnification. Right away, there are pieces of plant material scattered all across the slide, and down near the bottom, there's one much larger piece that immediately stands out. Let's get a closer look. Now we're at 100 times magnification. And there it is. Those little honeycomb shapes are individual plant cells. This is one of the biggest intact pieces of plant tissue we've seen so far. Let's keep zooming. Now we're at 400 times magnification. The cell walls are becoming much easier to see. Every one of those little compartments is an individual plant cell, and they're still packed tightly together. One more step. Now we're at 1,000 times magnification. The cells almost fill the entire screen. You can even start seeing the material inside each individual cell. For a jar of pasta sauce, that's a pretty incredible view.
People say you bring Italy to the store. Let's see if that's true.
All right. Next up, Bertolli. This sauce wants you to believe you're bringing a little piece of Italy home. That's a pretty big promise. Let's see what's actually in the jar. 40 times magnification. Right away, there's a large piece of plant material sitting near the top of the slide. The rest of the sample looks much more broken apart. Let's move in closer. Now we're at 100 times magnification. This larger piece is packed with tiny plant cells. It's one of the most organized pieces of tissue we've seen so far. Let's keep zooming. Now we're at 400 times magnification. The individual cells start to blend together. Instead of sharp cell walls, everything looks much softer, almost like the tissue has started breaking down. One more step. Now we're at 1,000 times magnification. Most of that structure is gone. All that's left is a small clump of material, surrounded by tiny droplets. That's a very different ending than what we saw with the other sauces.
If you made it this far, congratulations. You've officially watched me spend the last 20 minutes judging pasta sauce. The primizia buona gusta, of course, under a microscope, right? But now it's time to bring in the harshest critics on YouTube. This right here are nematodes. They've been around for millions of years. And I'm going to introduce these to the pasta sauce and see how they like it or not. I want to see their reaction. I don't think they're Italian, but we'll find out.
Before we can test the sauces, I've got to find our jury. I'm transferring a few nematodes onto a microscope slide. Now comes the hard part. Finding something that's only about 1 millimeter long and refuses to sit still. Once I get a few in focus, we're ready. Now, let's see which sauce goes on trial first. Before we start, let me introduce today's judges. They wiggled all the way from Italy. These are nematodes, tiny roundworms that live almost everywhere on Earth. They're constantly moving, constantly exploring, and constantly reacting to the world around them. Now, let's see what they think of our first sauce. First up, rouse. Before I add the sauce, the nematodes are everywhere. They're moving constantly, crossing over each other, barely sitting still. Now, let's introduce rouse. And there it is. Did you guys see it come in on the left side of the screen? So this is what I expected. Seems like nothing really affected these little guys, but let's give it some time. Okay, here we are at 20 minutes later. They're moving again. Maybe not quite as fast, but they're definitely active. So whatever happened, it wasn't permanent. Rouse gets a temporary slowdown. Now, let's see what the next sauce does. Before we introduce the Prego saw, let's establish our baseline. At 40 times magnification, the nematodes are healthy, active, and moving exactly as we'd expect. They're gliding across the slide, changing direction, and constantly weaving around the particles in their environment. There's no sign of sluggish movement or unusual behavior. This is exactly what a healthy population looks like before the experiment begins. Now that we have a clear baseline, let's introduce the Prego sauce and see what happens next. And here comes the Prego sauce, entering from the bottom of the screen. As it begins to spread across the slide, the nematodes immediately come into contact with it. For the first few seconds, they're still moving normally, but then something interesting starts to happen. Their movement begins to slow, becoming noticeably less active than it was just moments ago. It's the same response we observed with rouse, but it's still too early to know whether this change is temporary or something more. After watching the nematodes for about 20 minutes, they gradually returned to their normal activity. In other words, nothing permanently changed. At this point, both rouse and Prego produced essentially the same response. The nematodes slowed down for a while, then became active again. Because the reaction was so similar between these two sauces, I decided not to repeat the nematode test for the remaining 3 brands. So now, it's time to reveal the final rankings, Kieran, and see which pasta sauce came out on top and which one finished dead last. We've looked at the ingredients, we've examined each sauce under the microscope, and we've even watched how our nematodes responded. Now, it's time to put all of that evidence together. This isn't based on price, popularity, or marketing claims. These rankings are based entirely on what we observed throughout this investigation. So let's count them down from worst to best and reveal which pasta sauce earned the top spot. Coming in at number 5, Bertolli. Under the microscope, Bertolli stood out for all the wrong reasons. Instead of seeing distinct pieces of tomato and a more natural structure, the sauce appeared heavily processed and extremely uniform. It wasn't the worst because of its taste or even its ingredients alone, but because it looked the furthest removed from what I'd expect to see in a traditional tomato sauce. Based on everything we observed, Bertolli takes the number 5 spot. Coming in at number 4, Prego. Under the microscope, Prego looked fairly consistent, but also more processed than some of the higher ranked sauces. The tomato structure was still there, but it appeared smoother and more uniform overall. When we introduced the sauce to our nematodes, we saw the same temporary slowdown that we observed with rouse, followed by a return to normal activity about 20 minutes later. So that didn't give Prego an advantage or a disadvantage. In the end, Prego delivered exactly what I'd expect from a mainstream pasta sauce. Nothing looked particularly concerning, but nothing really stood out either. And that's why it comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, ragu. Going into this investigation, I honestly expected ragu to finish much lower. It's often viewed as a budget sauce, and that comes with a lot of assumptions. But under the microscope, it actually performed better than I expected. You could still make out recognizable tomato structure, and it didn't appear as heavily processed or as uniform as some of the lower ranked sauces. That doesn't mean it was perfect. It still showed signs of significant processing, but there was enough natural texture left to earn it a spot in the middle of the pack. So while ragu didn't come close to taking the top spot, it also wasn't the disappointment I expected. Based on everything we observed, ragu earns the number 3 position. Coming in at number 2, Classico. Classico impressed me more than I expected. Under the microscope, it retained a lot of the natural tomato structure, and the sauce looked less processed than most of the others we examined. There was still some refinement, but compared to the lower ranked sauces, felt much closer to what I'd expect from a traditional tomato sauce. In the end, it was a very close call between Classico and our number 1 pick. Both performed well under the microscope, but one sauce managed to edge out the competition for delivering a clean, natural-looking structure and one of the strongest overall performances in this investigation, Classico earns the number 2 spot. That means coming in at number 1 is Rouse. Throughout this entire investigation, Rouse consistently looked the most natural under the microscope. The tomato structure remained well-defined, the ingredients appeared less processed, and overall, it stayed remarkably close to what I'd expect from a simple tomato sauce. Even during the nematode test, we saw the same temporary slowdown that occurred with Prego, followed by a return to normal activity about 20 minutes later. Nothing about that test separated it from the others. What ultimately earned Rouse the top spot was what we could actually see: less refinement, more recognizable tomato structure, and a cleaner overall appearance than the rest of the sauces we examined. Does that mean Rouse is the healthiest pasta sauce on the shelf? No. This investigation wasn't designed to answer that question, but based entirely on what we observed under the microscope, Rouse takes the number 1 spot.
Well, folks, there you have it. 5 pasta sauces and dozens of microscope slides and a whole lot of time staring at tomatoes. One thing these investigations keep teaching me is that the label on the front of the jar rarely tells the whole story. Sometimes the microscope confirms what you'd expect, and sometimes it completely surprises you. Hey, if there's a food you've always been curious about, let me know down in the comments. There's a good chance it'll end up under the microscope in a future investigation. And if you'd like to learn exactly how I prepare these slides, use a microscope, and capture these images, I put everything into the official Visual Scientist Lab Manual. It isn't free, but every purchase goes right back into funding future experiments and keeping this channel going. Aspetto un momento. Grazie mille. Ciao bella. Take care of yourself and others.